Arizona dominated early and responded to game pressure late, and once again proved they're too much for the opposition this season. Arizona stays perfect, and Michigan falls. Great day for the Wildcats. Bear down. Thank you guys for tuning in. This is Postcast.
You are Locked On Wildcats, your daily podcast on the Arizona Wildcats. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into Postcast. Leif Thulin with you here. Arizona, perfect still. And this was a game where Arizona wasn't really tested in the way that you'd say is like, okay, that's a truly frightening scare. However, there was game pressure, and that hasn't happened to Arizona in a while. And Arizona still comes up with a double-digit victory against a good TCU team. TCU is motivated, they were physical, and Arizona was too much for them. Here are my biggest takeaways. The biggest takeaway was the first half of the first half. Arizona was suffocating on defense. TCU had no chance. All the Arizona's offense, solid, but the defense was unreal. There were no easy baskets, no runouts allowed in the first half, and that lead was enough to ward off TCU the rest of the game. And that was despite an okay at best second half. There were some good responses in the second half from Arizona, but I wasn't terribly impressed from the second half as a whole. But that first 10, 12 minutes, Arizona was unbelievable. Defensively, they were holding TCU to shooting very, very difficult contested twos the whole time. There were no three-point shots taken. There were no easy buckets from three. There were no easy buckets from two. Just a lot of bully ball, try to go through the chest of Mo Krivas, try to score near the cup, and that's just not going to work very well. And Fran Fraschilla, who I really like, I don't know how you guys feel about him, but I've always been a fan of him. I've interacted with him a little bit while working for a radio station, and I always enjoyed talking to him. He spoke about Arizona's depth. And to me, it's more than the depth. It's how well-rounded this team is. And you can never really, and he made the point of you can never really say who's the best player on the team. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. But you can never talk about all of the amazing players Arizona has. Like, no one really mentioned Bradley in the first half, even though I think he's the most indispensable player on the team. The second half showed that. He scored 17 the second half alone. But really, think about this. Most teams would say, wait a minute, like the guy who's scoring 19 a game in the last 10 games, Braden Burris, who's the leading scorer on the team entering today's game. If you were to say that guy did not have a particularly game in a road game, a difficult environment against a team that's really physical, and in my opinion, got a very friendly whistle in TCU, you'd say, oh, Burris had 6 points. Like, you're going to be in trouble. Like a guy of Burris' ilk. Well, not Arizona, because everyone can step up and play. Koa Peat led the way with 20 points, seven boards, 3 assists. Jaden Bradley, 17 in the second half, 17 from Dell'Orso. And you just know that the ability to score and have multiple different guys score is super sustainable. But what's more sustainable is that this defense will always, no matter how well or poorly Arizona's playing, will give Arizona a chance. The defense is the identity. These buckets that are made, essentially it was so difficult for TCU to score for 12 minutes of this game that no matter how energized they played when they played that zone and held Arizona to 2 of 10 to finish that second stint of the first half, if you will, then you are able to overcome those dry spells. You know, I'm reading some of your guys' comments, and there's a comment that says, you know, about the worst we've played all year. Hate to tell you, but TCU is a pretty good team. TCU is a pretty good team. And that's the point. Like, I think there were stretches that were pretty poor from Arizona, yet it was never in doubt. And yeah, there is a point of where you're so good that you start to complain about not playing particularly well, despite a double-digit road win in conference play in the best conference in America. That's the level that Arizona is at because their defense is so good. Because the defense and chemistry offensively, like every time Arizona got into a spot where you're like, okay, you need a bucket right now. It never got dire, but it was like, we need a bucket. Up 7. Okay, Koa Peat, pump fake, drive to kick out Jaden Bradley, pump fake all the way to the rim. Then Koa Peat and 1. Like, those situations they demonstrate a ton of poise, 1. But 2, the defense that allowed Arizona to build that lead still allows them to win this game. It's so hard to score sustainably enough against Arizona. And on the flip side, Arizona is going to score 80 plus. Like they scored against a good defensive team, top 20 defensive team, 86 points in a game that was very physical and there weren't many free throws made. It's so hard to keep Arizona down offensively. But like I've said all season, Arizona's defense is better than its offense. And that's so strange. I do want to talk about one thing that stuck out to me. It was that the turnovers in the second half were glaring. The physicality. I mean, I mentioned I didn't think the referees did a particularly good job. I am not someone who will ever blame a referee for a game. Like if there are bad ref calls, I will never be the person to be like, okay, like the ref screwed the team over. Like never. I do think Mo Krivas struggled today because they were allowing TCU to hit him and he didn't finish well. Like he missed a dunk, fell, he had a couple turnovers. But I bring that up to bring this up. TCU was able to turn Arizona over. And the only way to score in Arizona sustainably is when they're not set defensively. So I want to read you about the tale of two halves in this one. In the first half, and mind you, I really think the first 12 minutes of the half for Arizona were fantastic. The next 8 were okay. But these are all encompassing numbers of the first half. Arizona led the points off of turnovers 11-1 in the first half. The rebound differential is +7. Fast break points 10-3. And points in the paint. Drum roll, please, because that's where TCU, everyone tried to shoot. Every time tried to shoot. Well, it was 26-8 Arizona. The whole half. The second half, and then in terms of turnovers, Arizona had 1. Now you go to the second half, and now the box score is finally up for me. The second half, Arizona points off of turnovers +6 for TCU. Rebounds +1 for TCU. Second chance points +9 for TCU. Points in the paint +8 for TCU. Fast break points +3 for Arizona. That's not going to happen frequently. Arizona played, they shot 50% or better they shot 17 of 31 in the second half. But I thought they played a poor second half and got outplayed in the second half. But Arizona built up a 16-point lead. Like there's a reason there's 2 halves to a game. I do think the second half we can nitpick. We have that ability to say that Arizona is not necessarily playing their best basketball in that second half, but it's a 40-minute game for a reason. Arizona can play a great first half and play an okay second half and still win by double digits because they're a great team. They are an absolutely great team. And I was not an Arizona fan. I've never been an Arizona fan, but I watched plenty of that 2014, 2015 team. I think that Arizona is safely better because they score more sustainably than those teams did. They don't rely as heavily on a Nick Johnson at the end of a game. Like there are multiple options. Jaden Bradley's the guy. But you see at the end of these runs where Arizona need a bucket, I think Koa Peat had the answers for the most part today. Koa Peat was on the bench when TCU started to take off and provide pressure. Arizona finished the first half 2 of 10 from the field. That zone gave them issues. 7-0 start for TCU. Arizona responds 7-0 back. It gets down to 7 points with about 8 minutes remaining in this game. Arizona expands that lead and wins by 13. Never really sweating. And I think Koa Peat and Jaden Bradley are a tandem that you have to deal with. And it's not one player has those advantages. I think Koa Peat's the best advantage creator, and the composure and veteran presence of Jaden Bradley certainly is fantastic at the end of the game. But there's not only a two-headed monster, but this team's extremely deep and able to do a lot of different things. Like Burry's leading scorer on the team this season, 6 points. Typically a bad thing on the road against a borderline top 25 type of team. Doesn't matter. Arizona wins by 13. Coming up next, I'm going to review some keys, go over a few more of my takeaways from this game, a couple statistics to review that really speak to how great Arizona was at certain points of this game. All that and more on Locked On Wildcats postcast. Fridays already feel different during basketball season, and FanDuel is making them even better. Every Friday night before the games tip off, FanDuel gives fans a new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame, a limited time window where special offers from 6 to 7:30 Eastern have become appointment viewing with NBA Happy Hour. Opening a FanDuel app during Happy Hour always brings something new, boosts and bonuses and surprises. So before tip-off, check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping. NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 Eastern. Little basketball, a little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. That's NBA Happy Hour, only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Welcome back to Locked On Wildcats. Leif Thulin with you here. And in postcast, I'm trying to give a full picture. I know that may sound critical saying survives. In fairness, I wrote that graphic while the game was kind of hanging in the balance. Still, Arizona pulled away further than I anticipated by the end. But the survival is really that all teams have lulls. I don't think Arizona necessarily had a lull. I thought TCU ratcheted up the intensity, and Arizona ended up playing what I thought was suboptimal for what I think is the best team in the country. And by the way, Michigan lost today, so there's fewer Michigan believers saying that they're the better team in the country with as much conviction. But we'll get to that in a moment. But my point being is Arizona survived their worst stretch of play, coinciding with the best stretch of play from TCU, who is a home team in this game and a quality opponent. And Arizona was able to rebound from those lulls, those stretches where Krivas and Awaka weren't as effective as they have been as they have been in many games this season. They were not as dominant on the glass. They were not as good at the turnover differential as they have been in different games this season. Arizona did not score as easily as they have at different times this season. And there's always a gradient. You don't know who's going to play great every single night. Like I said, Arizona's got the luxury of 8 great players. But they found a way to win and survive those bad stretches that I don't think were complacency related. And Dell'Orso was fantastic. Big shot at the end of the clock from like 30 in the first half. A huge shot fading right when it was a 7-point game to make it a double-digit game again. And we talked in the preview for the keys to the game that Anthony Dell'Orso has had a bad shooting stretch for too long for such a great shooter. He was due, and boy was he. He was great today. So now, without further ado, let's get to the keys that I laid out for this game. So my first key against TCU was this, and I want to talk about this point in specific because as I watched the first half, I thought Arizona was unbelievable at this. Second half, a little less so. My first key was continue to limit the turnovers. We had these turnover bugs against Abilene Christian, 19 turnovers, 15 against Bethune-Cookman. You saw 10 turnovers in the first half against San Diego State and what was close. Arizona then had very few turnovers in some of the recent games. Very few against Utah. You had very few against Kansas State. TCU creates turnovers. They force 15 turnovers per game. So my goal was to turn the ball over fewer than 12 times. But really, the reason for this was not necessarily like just for good practice. It was because TCU, the way they score is they try to punch you in the mouth and go downhill and score over bigs. If Arizona is playing TCU is going to struggle to score every single time in the half court. They score off of athleticism and pushing tempo. And if they push tempo and they make the game ugly, then they can get a few threes by driving and putting pressure more so than they could against a set Arizona defense. So Arizona had 1 turnover in that first half, and it led to a very poor shooting performance from TCU. TCU in the first half shot, I want to say 32%, but that improved in the final 4 minutes. And 32% is nowhere near good enough to beat Arizona. Arizona was up 19-8, and I took this note. I said Arizona is playing great, solid defense, not risk-taking, but then they're playing workman-like offense. They're getting the ball to the right spots to score, but they're not gambling on defense. They're not, doing anything flashy. But all they're doing is making TCU have to work way too hard to sustainably score on them. TCU wants to score in the paint, and Arizona is looming large with their size. And TCU is playing everything in the paint. They're trying to score over the bigs. It doesn't work when Mo is in the game. And when Tobey was in, it worked a little bit. And it will be interesting to monitor just how teams try to score against Arizona, depending which big is in. But it's not like Tobey's bad defensively. It's just Mo alters shots at an unbelievable level. So now we get to the statistics part of this. First half, like I said, Arizona did a great job not turning the ball over. Arizona had 7 turnovers in the second half as opposed to just 3 in the first half. And I said 1, but it was 1 live ball turnover. So they had 10 turnovers on the game, and that achieves the goal. Now we go to the game, and we talk about points off of turnovers, 15 for Arizona, 11 for TCU. That's a success. And if you were to go off of fast break points, Arizona was plus 10 there. So they got more uncontested baskets against a team that thrives on defensive pressure. Second key, staying with the themes of possession, I want to see Arizona get 10 to 15 more boards than TCU, and I thought they would due to the virtue of their defense being so good, making the other team miss more than Arizona would. That did happen, but the rebounding part did not. It was +6 for Arizona. I told you guys, TCU is really tough on the glass. I had some Twitter people, some YouTube comments saying, "Oh, like they're a short team. Their tallest player 6'8". They're strong. They play hard on the glass. So Arizona +6 on the glass, +2 on the offensive glass, and my goal was 13 offensive rebounds. They had 10, which was pretty low for an Arizona team. In terms of second chance points, they converted on those 10 offensive boards, 12 second chance points. And my next goal is a stat that if you guys listen to me a lot, the everydayers know exactly what's coming. It's paint-oriented points. And I think the goal in a game that I thought would be lower scoring, and it was a little lower than Arizona's average because Arizona scores 92 per game. It was 60 paint-oriented points, aka points in the paint plus free throws made. And I thought it would be lower than 86 scored. I thought it would be 79. I predicted 79, 72. And at a moment, it looked like a decent prediction, but Arizona was too much for too long of this game. And my number I came out with was 42 point paints for Arizona and 11 made free throws. So that's 53. They were under that. I will say that Arizona hit 7 threes in this game, and they also were hitting some mid-range jump shots when TCU in zone. And Arizona was able to get the ball in the middle of the floor. And I also think the free throw number could have been way higher. I thought Mo Krivas particularly got a short end of the whistle today. And the next goal I had for Arizona was hold TCU to 5 or fewer threes. They make 8 at a 35% clip. And I expect them to try a few more than their average, but it's hard to score against Arizona inside. So make it hard on from 3 and make them take more than they're comfortable, because the way TCU wants to play is bully, and I don't think that works against Arizona. So we nailed that in terms of the preview. In terms of the effectiveness of the goal, Arizona held TCU to 6 threes on 29% shooting. Like, you achieved the goal. The other thing is they made most of those in the second half. And in the second half, TCU went 3 of 11, and the first half was 3 of 10. Up until the final 4 minutes, though, TCU hadn't hit any threes, and they namely limited Lele Vicious. He didn't score in the second half, and in the first half, I'm not sure he scored there either. Yeah, he ended up with 0 points. He's their best shooter, so he didn't get any shots up. He and Toulson are the best shooters. Toulson got hot and scored 20 points. But if you're going to have a guy like David Punch go for 10 on sub 50% shooting, and Edmonds struggle as well, Pierre and Harding were solid, but the bigs for TCU, which where they usually create advantages, I just don't think there's a way that a team like TCU can win. And I'm reading some of the comments once more. I addressed the survives comment. When I wrote that it was Arizona was up 7 and the game got scarier, I felt very confident the entirety of this game, and I even said so on Twitter that I was not worried whatsoever. Now, addressing the next comment, 46 points from TCU and U of A, 43 in the second half. However, TCU last puts in the 2 free throws in the last second. I understand, but the point was Arizona was not the better team in the second half. They were able to be solid and ever tested because they had a spectacular first 12 minutes to this game, as opposed to a very well played second half. I think when you're the number 1 team in the country and you have title aspirations, you're allowed to be graded on a scale that is not fair for most teams. And then you look at the responses. The responses of a veteran team that employs 4 freshmen. And when I say a veteran team, I'm talking about the maturity. I'm not saying the years, because I understand that's oxymoronic. The point was, I think Arizona has a collective calm that is the embodiment of how Tommy Lloyd coaches. Whereas I think in previous years, from an outsider perspective, I was very skeptical of the 23 team. I picked them to lose in the second round against Missouri. They, in fact, were upset by Princeton. And then when they played against Clemson, I actually took Clemson in that game because both teams play very slowly. And in terms of Clemson, they were huge, so they could keep Arizona off the glass. This was a game where the team effectively kept Arizona off the glass. But I never felt scared, even in a road environment, not a neutral site or anything like that, because Arizona has the ability to say, you know what, it's time for Jaden Bradley to step up. Whereas it felt like, okay, it's Caleb Love time, and it did not go well more frequently than not in those games, even 5 of 21 against Clemson. I don't want to bring up that stuff, but Jaden Bradley, there's a more inherent trust with Tommy Lloyd. I also think Tommy Lloyd and his attitude the way he is, he's calm. I think this team has a poise, a presence about them that's calm, but tough, physical, and hard nosed. Tommy Lloyd, I referenced this multiple times last week. He talked about how the best way to win in basketball right now is having size, because size always shows up to the fight. You have a chance because you can rebound. You have a chance because you put pressure on the rim. You have a chance because you're going to thwart them at the rim. And size and physicality travel. And I think that Arizona has that, but they also have the poise and the skill set. The poise comes from Jaden Bradley. The poise comes from the veterans, but it's also there with the freshmen. The freshmen show up and have tremendous skill. Burries had a bad game in this case, and Arizona was never tested, and that's their leading scorer of the team. Koa Peat was very good in this game, but in the stretches where he was out, there was a chance for TCU. When he comes back in, he's the advantage creator that no one can stop. And then you have the closer in Jaden Bradley. The poise, tenacity, and collectiveness of this team are so impressive. And I'm going to take a break here in a moment. I want you guys in the comments here, both on YouTube if you watch this after, but especially the guys live, to tell me about how you rank the order of best players on this team, and then the difference between best player and most indispensable, because I think that's a very fun debate for Arizona, because they play 8 very good players, and I think it could go many different ways. So I'm going to take a break real quick, and I'll be right back shortly on Postcast, and we'll talk to you guys about my ranking for the most indispensable players, what it means to stay number one with Michigan losing in the grand scheme of things, and also one more takeaway that I have yet to bring up because I think it's a bold prediction. All that and more in just a few seconds. All righty, welcome back to Locked On Wildcats. Leif Thulin with you here. I think it is very important to note that this is me in a vacuum trying to explain something that will always change. But my ranking for most indispensable players on Arizona is Jaden Bradley, because he is a point guard, and the point guard is most important. But I will say this: I think Bradley is less indispensable than you'd think, because I think Burries and Pete have more impressive ways to distribute, because they're such good creators. Then the second thing I'll tell you is I think Koa Peat's the best player. I think Koa Peat's the best player in Arizona, but I think Jaden Bradley's the most indispensable. Both things can be true. I would argue Jaden Bradley's the most indispensable player. I would argue the second most indispensable player is Mo Krivas. You'd say, wait a minute, indispensable would mean that, like, if he's out, then we're screwed, right? That is what I mean. Mo Krivas has a guy who has started for him in Tobe Awaka, and I'm very well aware of that. However, Mo Krivas allows Arizona to defend the way that they do. Mo Krivas allows that Arizona can play the high pressure ball screen defense that funnels into Krivas. They can play into the gaps, play aggressive, and try to go for steals that Karchenkov comes up with. And then Krivas alters shots. In the first half, I'll pull up a stat for you guys here. In the first half, from the field, TCU was 32%. They were 9 of 28. They went 3 of 10 from 3. So that's 6 of 18, 33% from 2. Most teams shoot north of 50% from 2. Mo Krivas in a couple years ago held teams in 8 games to 36% from 2. Most 2s are layups. Let me remind you, TCU is a very interior-oriented team, and he held the team to 33% shooting in the first half defensively. Then you get to, so he's my second most indispensable because he's important offensively with the pressure he puts with all those duck-ins and seals. But at defense, he is the identity. So I go Bradley, Krivas. Number 3, I'm going Pete, because Pete is the best advantage creator. I think he's the best player on the team. And whenever Arizona needs answers, Koa Peat and Jaden Bradley step up. But Koa Peat can do things that no one else on this team can do. And I think he's the consummate teammate. People were concerned about him, and I told you guys, there's no need to be concerned about this guy. Come Big 12 play, he's going to be the same guy we thought he was, 16-8. He's been that. Now, number 4, most indispensable player. This is an interesting one. A lot of people say Burries, because he's the leading scorer on the team entering this game, and he shoots the ball well, and he gets downhill, all this different stuff. I would go Tobe Awaka. Tobe Awaka allows for Arizona to have these record-setting rebounding nights. He's the best rebounder in college basketball, and allows for Tobe Awaka and Arizona to have just enormous disparity between how many possessions they have, aka possessions and chances to score, versus the opponents. So let me read that off. Number 1, Bradley. 2, Krivas. 3, Peat. 4, Awaka, and then 5, I would go with Burries because he's a very good scorer and he makes Arizona more dynamic. The craziest part is that's my top 5 most indispensable. The craziest part is my favorite player on the team is Ivan Karchenko. I've been very open about that. He's the best perimeter defender in the Big 12, including over Jaden Bradley, including over Emmanuel Sharp and guys on Houston that are touted as unbelievable defenders. I think he's the best defender in the Big 12 on the perimeter. Karchenkov's awesome. Now, the best player for Arizona to me is Koa Peat. Koa Peat, number 1, Jaden Bradley, 2, Krivas, 3, Burries, 4, Awaka, 5. So same top 5 to me, but a different order of importance and indispensability. Let me know what you guys think there, both in the comments and right now. And my last stat for you guys on this one is, and I had one more key, by the way. I messed that up. I wanted to see the combination of Burries, Dell'Orso, Karchenkov, and Aristo combined for 6 threes, and I think Dell'Orso is due. So that was my last stat, my last key. Let's see how many they combined for, because I actually don't know yet. The answer to that would be that Dell'Orso hit 3, Burries hit 2, and Karchenkov hit 1. So that's 6 on the nose, and Bradley hit a 3 as well. That puts Arizona at 7. If Arizona hits 7 threes, they're going to win just about any game unless they have horrible turnover issues, because I didn't think Arizona was particularly good offensively for decent stretches, both of the first half at the end and the second half in the middle, and they shot over 50% from the field. I didn't think Arizona dominated the glass, both at eye test, and that bears out by the stats. They were only +6, and they were barely ahead in turnovers. They're +2, or they had 2 fewer turnovers, and they only had 4 more points off of turnovers, and yet their offense is so much more sustainable than a team in TCU who thrives on taking high percentage shots. That's really indicative of a very impressive team that can do a lot of things. They can win a lot of different type of games. And the last 2 games, I've been impressed with both the resolve and ability to say, okay, we've had moments where we haven't been our best, but let's put our foot on the gas and run away from teams that have no business competing with us. It's a different beast against TCU than it was against Kansas State, and that's why this game is closer. But a 13-point win where there was 0 time in this game where TCU held a lead, and there was 0 time where TCU really had a chance. That's very, very impressive. And now let's talk about Michigan, because I see you guys in the comments. Michigan, I watched the game. I've said this for a while. Michigan's a type of team that is a freight train when they're ahead, but when they've played a lot of close games. Against TCU, they were on the brink. TCU had a chance to win that game, not only in terms of like a shot to win it, but they were leading for the majority. Wake Forest, who is not particularly good, had a shot to win the game before going to overtime against Michigan. Michigan barely beat Penn State the other day with Penn State's best player out, and they won by 2. Then they play Wisconsin in Ann Arbor, and they lose that game. And Wisconsin is leading the whole second half. It wasn't like, this miraculous thing. Michigan made it closer at the end of the game, and it was never like a wide disparity. Don't get me wrong there either. But Michigan was trailing and making big shots, pressuring the ball. Wisconsin missing front end of the 1-and-1s. Like, it felt like a March Madness game. And Wisconsin came back from an early deficit, and then in the second half looked like the team with more composure, more poise. Michigan just had better athletes, and Wisconsin had to hit crazy hard shots. Like, Wisconsin hit incredibly difficult shots and timely ones, but Michigan played panicked. And they've played a number of close games. And Arizona now has won their last 11 games by double digits. This was the smallest win margin in the last 11 games. Arizona is a juggernaut. And now going forward, let's go look at the Ken Palm, see how Arizona moved in this one, because I like to do that during postcast, and then I'll touch on the schedule coming up. This was the biggest test in the first 7 games. I think Arizona will be 20-0 by the time they play BYU in Provo. Michigan remains number 1 in Ken Palm. It is closer now. Arizona has gained on Michigan and Ken Palm. Arizona 16-0, Michigan 14-1. Arizona is now up to 5 in offensive rating, and they've fallen to 4 in defensive rating by a fraction. Let's look at who they have fallen behind. They're a fraction behind Michigan State defensively, and Iowa State, and then Michigan. So Arizona is top 5 in both offense and defense, and my eyes say that's true. And who cares about what the analytics say in terms of where you are in that? If you're top 5 in both, you're excellent. If you're top 10 in both, you're Final Four good. Now you got to take care of it. So we'll go to the rest of the Big 12 schedule and kind of give you an updated prediction. I told you guys I predicted 26-5 before the season, and I was among the most bullish on Arizona. Now, I think 26-5 would be a disappointment, which is crazy to say in what is the best league in the country. Arizona State is up next. That's on Wednesday. Arizona should win that by 20 plus. They play UCF at UCF on Saturday. I will say, similar to TCU, that's a tricky game. UCF's pretty good. I think UCF and TCU are similar. They're both 7th, 8th best team in the Big 12. I think Arizona wins that, but I do think you got to be careful in matching up with them because they're athletic and they are a team that is well coached by Johnny Dawkins. Now, I think Arizona wins that game. Then you play Cincinnati, which is a dumpster fire right now. They are good defensively, but I have Arizona winning that by 15-20. Then you play West Virginia also at home. I think you win that by 15-20 as well. I wouldn't be surprised if Arizona wins all those 4 by double digits. And then comes BYU. BYU is getting better. They have A.J. DeBonsa. I would guess when that day comes, unless BYU has a couple losses, BYU will be favored by the betting odds. And Marriott Center is a raucous environment. I'll be there. I cannot wait for that. And I got Arizona win that too, going to 21-0. Well, lots got to happen till then. Thank you guys for tuning in. As always, love you guys for chipping in. And also, the comments are awesome. I'm sorry if I didn't get to all of them, but there's too many, and that's because there's a lot of people on here, and I'm forever grateful for that. Big win for Arizona, 16-0, almost there for conference play, getting to that prediction of 20-0. I think it's possible. I think Arizona is the best team in the country. You just got to stay healthy and keep winning, baby. That's it for Postcast. I'll have a show in-depth recapping this game and breaking down what's ahead for Arizona athletics coming up on Monday. Thanks for tuning in, and as always, bear down.